Hi, I'm Susan Moles. This is my Cannabis Research, The Truth as I Have Learned It, Part 3. Greed. Allow me to explain a series of events which occurred in the 1930s, forcing this plant into prohibition and why it would be difficult to get it back. I'm going to introduce you to some men, starting with William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper journalist. He was also a U.S. Senator from 1886 to 1893. When William was 24, his father gave him a choice of his holdings, and William chose the San Francisco Examiner, which the family had acquired years earlier for political reasons. Remember that there was no mass media as we have today. People had their newspapers and they believed everything they read. They had nothing to compare it to, so they had no reason not to believe. In the 1947 Encyclopedia Britannica, under Newspapers, Yellow Journalism, you will find quite an interesting story about Mr. Hearst. Seems he used his newspapers for his own self-interest. Mr. Hearst had some land in Mexico, which the Mexican government seized. Keep in mind, Mr. Hearst was a bigot, and if you weren't white, he hated you, and he was already on record of speaking derogatory about Mexicans. He began a yellow journalism campaign against the country of Mexico, running headlines such as, "Marijuana, that killer drug from Mexico," "Those lazy marijuana-smoking Mexicans." Much of our perception, even to this day, of the Mexican people is a direct result of this negative campaign. Remember that people believed what they read in the newspaper. Mr. Hearst gave us the word marijuana, so individuals would not know that he was talking about the cannabis they had growing out in the backyard to feed, clothe, and comfort their families. Everyone knew about hemp, but he scared them with the talk of this killer drug from Mexico. Mr. Hearst took a strong stand on several controversial issues, including trying to start a war with Spain in the 1890s, opposing Japanese immigration, and was very anti-British. In his defense, he did give us antitrust legislation and the 8-hour workday. By 1925, Mr. Hearst owned 25 newspapers in 17 cities. His paper needs were enormous. Meanwhile, across the country in Washington, Andrew William Mellon was appointed Secretary of the Treasury under President Harding. He remained in his position through Coolidge in 23 and then Hoover in 29. When the stock market crashed in 1929, who do you think people were looking at? The Secretary of the Treasury, perhaps? In 1932, he was appointed Ambassador to England. Seems he needed to leave the country. Mr. Mellon was the owner of the 5th largest bank in America and had made several investments. He believed the best way to succeed in business, destroy the competition. Since one of his investments was involved in processes which utilized wood fiber instead of hemp, the chances of success would be much greater if hemp went away. He was DuPont's main investor. Although hemp was extremely prominent in our society, grown like any other commodity, it was just so dang tall that harvesting it economically took a while in coming. Because our needs for pulp and paper increased, people looked for other alternatives besides hemp. World Fiber Corp introduced the first machine capable of economically harvesting the plants just months before it became illegal in October of 1937. Before losing his job as Secretary of the Treasury in 1932, Mr. Mellon set a plan in motion to wipe out cannabis. In 1931, he formed a new bureau, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. We know it today as the DEA. He appointed his nephew-in-law, Harry J. Anslinger, to head the bureau. Anslinger remained in this position until 1962 when Kennedy fired him. Rumor has it Kennedy used marijuana for his back pain from his war injuries and had planned to end prohibition in his second term. Anslinger shared the same racist attitude and greedy personality as Mellon, and set about quickly to eradicate cannabis, as his uncle-in-law wished. With the help of Hearst, who had been promised incredible savings on his paper needs, the campaign began. On Tuesday, May 4th, 1937, Dr. William C. Woodward of the American Medical Association testified before the House Ways and Means Committee of the 75th Congress regarding House Resolution 6385 and stated, "We cannot understand yet, Mr. Chairman, why this bill should have been prepared in secret for 2 years without any intimation even to the profession that it was being prepared, and that this act should not be passed as written. Woodward also pointed out marijuana was not a real word and that the proper term was cannabis. Other witnesses on that day cited newspaper articles for their justification that cannabis was becoming a nuisance to society. Remember Mr. Hearst? He was doing his part. On June 14, 1937, before the full House, the question was raised, has the AMA been consulted on this issue? Representative Fred Vinson, Democrat from Kentucky, stated that a Dr. William Wharton had given his full support and approval from the AMA, which he represented as legal counsel. Representative Vinson kind of lied. Dr. Woodward testified there was no Dr. Wharton, and the AMA was not on board. The vote was taken and passed, and the Senate approved it the very next day. Many, including the Chicago Tribune, challenged Anslinger's prohibition almost immediately. They ended up burning 15 acres in the field that had been growing since 1934, after exhausting all attempts with Anslinger. The LaGuardia report of 1944 stated that marijuana cut down on other drug use and cut violence. The report refuted everything Anslinger had been saying. Anslinger denounced the report and LaGuardia. He denounced the New York Academy of Medicine. He denounced the doctors who researched the report and halted any further research or experiments without his personal permission, or you go to jail. He used his position to blackmail the AMA and get them to denounce the New York Academy of Medicine. Previous studies had also shown positive results, but they were kept under wraps. With so much positive information available, why was Anslinger so adamant about eradicating this plant? The best way to succeed in business? Destroy the competition. Almost everything DuPont makes synthetically can be made organically from hemp. I've heard it said that the government should legalize it and tax it. Well, basically that's what they did. Producers paid $1 a year and registered. Textile mills paid $24 a year. Each load was taxed at $1 an ounce if both parties were registered, and $100 an ounce if not. Hemp was selling for $15 a ton. Cannabis was taxed out of existence. After the Marijuana Tax Act was enacted October 1, 1937, our country still needed hemp, so we bought it from the Orient. In 1942, we found ourselves at war with the Orient, so our government went to the farmers in Kentucky and asked for their help. They showed them a film entitled Hemp for Victory, teaching the farmers how to grow, the war effort. Now, World War II was the biggest draft in our country's history. Practically every man went to war, unless you were a farmer in Kentucky growing for the war effort. And then not only did you, but none of your family had to go to war. Seniors in high school, their senior project, grow 2 acres for the war effort. The Navy realized that by eliminating marijuana, we had also eliminated a critical strategic industry. DuPont's nylon stretched and was not fit for mooring ropes. The government supplied 43 machines to harvest the crops. We grew hemp, we won the war, the project was disbanded, and the USA denied knowledge of the film Hemp for Victory until a pristine copy was found in 1990. Field documentation can now be found at the University of Minnesota Library.